years old.
Brilliant.
I'm currently studying social studies in Inchicore College. I'm in my second year.
Wonderful.
I hope to one day actually work for Tesla in child protection.
Excellent.
I've went through the system.
Yeah. Oh, great. And
Yeah.
how did you find it?
It had its good moments and it had its bad moments, but overall, like looking back, it has made me into the person I am today.
Hi there, my name is Gareth Noble. I'm a former board member of EPIC and I'm a children's rights solicitor. I am really pleased to be part of this really important discussion as part of your Care Day celebrations in 2021, and I'd particularly like to offer my congratulations to Jessica Duffy for all the work that she has put into this webinar and for highlighting a really important set of issues. I'm here to answer a couple of questions that Jessica has sent to me on the relationship of children in the care system and the criminal justice system. And the first question is, do you believe that there are a disproportionate number of young people in care going through the justice system? And the answer to that is sadly yes. I think there have been recent studies completed by Nicola Carr and her colleagues that there are a disproportionate number of children in the care system who also find themselves in the criminal justice system, and we might explore in a few moments why that might be.
Yeah, my name is Nicola Carr and I'm an Associate Professor in Criminology in the University of Nottingham, and with my colleague Paula Mayock I've done research on young people in care and the criminal justice system. The study that we did in Ireland certainly found that there was evidence of more young people from the care system in the criminal justice system than we would expect to see compared to young people in the general population. There is a problem with a lack of proper data in this area, but what we did find from data produced by Oberstown Children's Detention School was that there was significant numbers of young people with care experience within the children's detention school system and also going through the courts.
I know that you worked in the children's court. Could you tell me a little bit about that line of work?
Well, I'm a judge now for just over 8 years, and I was originally appointed in 2012, and then in 2013 I was appointed to or assigned to the Children's Court, which is in Smithfield. It's Ireland's only court that solely deals with juvenile justice, and I was there for 6 years. So I had good experience in relation to all the work that was there, so I got to see everything really in relation to cases involved in that. And then 2 years ago, I was appointed to the Circuit Court. So I'm in the 4 courts now. But in the Children's Court is effectively the same as the District Court, except that it is designed solely for children under the age of 18 years if they are in conflict with the law. Now, we have in juvenile justice in Ireland a very comprehensive criminal justice system, which is under the Children's Act 2001. And that's in compliance with international law. So international law is really with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. So if I'm referring to that, it's a big long word, so I simply say CRC, Convention on the Rights of the Child. And you probably have heard of the Convention on the Human Rights, and in 1948, after the Second World War. Well, the CRC is one of those 9 great conventions which every country in the world, bar the United States, has signed up to.
The second question then arising is, why do I think that there are a disproportionate number of young people in care going through the justice system? For many young people in the care system and for many young people in the criminal justice system, they have experienced loss, separation, and early life traumatic experiences. It is therefore understandable and inevitable and completely unnecessary that children in the care system find themselves in the criminal justice system. If we look, for example, at the number of young people in the criminal justice system and in the healthcare system who do not have the services and the supports that they require, who do perhaps not have the backup and the necessary therapeutic inputs that meet their welfare needs. For many young people who go through loss and separation, and for many young people who perhaps experience upheaval in relation to accommodation, for example, many of them find themselves in hostile accommodation, in short-term accommodation, and can often experience homelessness. That often exposes them to dangerous and to difficult situations. It's also the position that many young people within the criminal justice system experience those issues as well. And therefore, I think it is important to recognise that when we don't meet the welfare needs of young people, whether in the care system or in the criminal justice system, that there would be a disproportionate number of young people who fall into the criminal justice system quite unintentionally, and often avoidably.
There are a number of possible reasons for this, and one of which has to do with practices within care placements themselves, specifically around residential care. So some of our research would suggest that, some placements operate different policies whereby the Gardaí are called to deal with an issue that if a child was in their own home, the Gardaí wouldn't be called to deal with a particular issue. And this can lead to escalation and young people coming into the system. We also know that young people in care sometimes in these situations have experienced loss and trauma. There are sometimes young people experience difficulties that leads to their involvement in criminal justice contact through, for example, drug use and other kind of behaviours. There's also kind of issues around young people moving around different places, and that again exacerbating the situation. So there's a number of reasons, but one of the things that we've identified in the research is that there needs to be a proper look at this within the Irish context, taking on board young people's views about why this might be the case.
Judge, what do you think needs to be addressed to prevent young people in care being involved in crime and the justice system?
I think as adults and parents and as guardians, as carers, we have to be more accepting of children and adolescents, and not just as many adults. That we have to accept that, in fact, adolescents are not children and they're not adults. They are adolescents, and they have issues in relation to that. And they are developing not just physically, but they're also developing mentally, and we have to be able to adjust to that.
Jessica's next question is, what do you think needs to be addressed to prevent young people in care being involved in crime and the justice system? That's a really good question, and the answer, of course, first of all, is to say that because you are in the care system should not and does not inevitably mean that you find yourself in the criminal justice system. I often find that it is the children in the care system and also in the criminal justice system whose welfare needs are perhaps not being met, or they are not getting sufficient levels of support that find themselves in both of those systems. And therefore I think we need to ensure that we take a holistic approach to young people's needs. We need to hear, more importantly and most significantly, their voice. There is no greater expert in a young person's life than themselves. And I think that if we ensured that there are care plans and care supports that assist young people in pathways that mean that in terms of education and training, in terms of mentoring, in terms of therapeutic supports, that has their needs and their voice, that we would see a massive reduction in the difficulties and the challenges that young people face.
Because any child who goes through the juvenile justice system is by their nature vulnerable. So, children come with all sorts of vulnerabilities. I mean, one of the things about adolescence is, and you're coming out of adolescence now, but one of the things that we have discovered in the last 20 years, but particularly in the last 10 years, even less, is that we now know an awful lot about adolescent brain development, scientific development, which we didn't know before. So the child's brains are actually physically developing. And we all thought, more than 20 years ago, we would have put it down to hormones, psychological, not knowing issues, but actually there's a whole brain development. We have to take into account all of those issues. Now, a lot of children who come through the juvenile justice system have issues. They may have mental health issues, they may have addiction issues, they may themselves be subject to abuse, they may themselves be victims. So I don't think it'd be fair to categorize it just children in care as such, but we do have a duty, to look after the best interests of the child. And there is, of course, what we call an interface. There's an overlap between children in care and children in the court system, but we try and manage that as best we can.
I think there needs to be a proper look at this at a national level. So we know from our research that this is an issue. We know it from looking at the detention school, young people in children's detention school. But what we also found in our research is that there's lots of different practices taking place across the country, and that different care homes do different things, different Gardaí areas do different things, and there needs to be a proper policy at the national level about how this issue could be dealt with. It also needs to involve young people's perspectives to understand what it is from a young person's point of view about why these issues occur. So one of the things we recommend is that there needs to be a national policy in this area informed by young people, and also we need to have proper information about how many young people from care come into contact with the justice system. And at the moment, TUSLA don't produce that data systematically, so we don't have a full and accurate picture of that.
Question number 4 is, what do you think we should do to help prevent young people going down a bad path? It's important to realise that no young person wants to find themselves in the criminal justice system. We need to ensure that there are diversionary programmes. We need to ensure that their educational, medical and welfare needs are prioritised. And we need to ensure that people have real choices. We have huge numbers of youth homelessness. Even in terms of social welfare, there are different rates for young people after the age of 18 than those over another age. We need to look very, very significantly and properly at our mental health and welfare and well-being. We need to ensure that in terms of anybody who experiences substance misuse, that they are given the appropriate pathway. There is no youth court equivalent, for example, of the drugs court, and that is a gap that needs to be rectified. But most significantly at all, we need a criminal justice system and a care system that is designed and led by young people rather than agencies who have not experienced loss, separation, trauma and early life suffering. I think that if we listened to young people and acted upon their advices, we would, as I say, find far less numbers of people in the criminal justice system. And that goes for children and young people who are in the care system and those that are not.
What do you think we could do to help prevent young people as a whole from going down a bad path?
Well, I think we have to be understanding from our side. We have to accept children as they are. We have to accept that children have issues. I talk about brain development, but we have learning disabilities. It's no accident to say, and we do have empirical evidence to say this, that 60% of children who would end up in the criminal justice system would have learning disabilities. We would have maybe a quarter of children with mental health issues. Now, as I say, going back to the drugs thing, that's exacerbated in relation to that. So we have to be a bit more understanding. From the children's point of view, a good peer group is really important. So if you have a bad peer group, unfortunately, and I can understand it, one of the things we found, for example, is that people will, as teenagers, they will go into peer groups, and that's understandable. We found that actually, believe it or not, if children were engaging, particularly at a high end, with animals such as horses or dogs or whatever who were understanding, they had actually a very good outcome. And the reason we were wondering, why is this so? And they don't judge. Dogs don't judge. Horses don't judge. But we as humans probably judge a little bit too much. So probably rich for a judge to be saying that, but that's the reality. So we need to be a little bit less judgmental and a little bit more understanding in relation to it, from both adults and from children's point of view. Getting a decent peer group is really important.
The final question from Jessica is if I have any advice to give to young people to help them make better decisions. I think the first thing to say is that for all young people, we at times have made and do make silly decisions and silly choices. The former President of the United States of America, George W. Bush, once said, "When I was young and immature, I was young and immature." And I think we need to recognise, therefore, that bad choices don't have to be permanent choices. Bad paths don't have to be permanent bad paths. I think it's really important that for any young person who has experience or adverse experiences with Gardaí and with the criminal justice system, realise and understand that there are supports there available for them, that there is nothing inevitable about being in the criminal justice system or remaining in the criminal justice system, and that with the right supports, with the right motivation, and with the best of intentions, we can ensure that different paths lead to better outcomes. It's also very important that young people who do come before the courts, and even those who are convicted of offences, shouldn't have to live their lives with those difficult and bad choices that they may have made being left permanently hanging around their neck. We all know that convictions, whether as a young person or as an older person, can have serious consequences in terms of travel, can have serious and enduring impacts in terms of employment and seeking accommodation and so on. And so it is therefore very, very important that if we can demonstrate that we have turned a path, that those things are not like albatrosses around our neck, and that we can move on and not have to always be reminded or remembered for difficult times.
I think for young people, and other research has shown this as well, that's what's really important in a situation where there is contact with the criminal justice system, for example, through a police interview or going through courts and subsequent to that, is that it's really important that young people have advocates who can represent their views and interests and advise them through these processes. It's really important for anybody who has contact with the criminal justice system, adult or young people, to have proper legal advice and representation, and I think that's particularly important for young people in care also.
Is there any advice that you would give a young person to help to make better decisions?
Well, trust yourself. It's a hard time going through adolescence, but it's a really exciting time. I mean, you don't have all the prejudice that we as adults tend to accumulate going forward. I think you have to be more understanding of yourself. I think you have to accept that you may not know everything, but you have a huge, huge world ahead of you, a huge way forward. And I think, if everyone could support one person, that would make a big difference. Everyone needs a friend. So I would say that, whether that's a parent, whether it's somebody who's a responsible adult, whether it's a sibling, or whether it's just a friend, it makes such a difference. If somebody has somebody to be able to talk to, and that can make all the difference.
And would I be able to ask you another question?
Okay.
How did you get into your line of work?
I kind of fell into it, to be honest. What happened was I was a solicitor for 30 years in practice, and I applied to become a district court judge. And then the then president of the district court asked me, would I mind part-time doing some of the children's court? And then there was kind of saying, well, maybe you're not too bad at it. Would you mind staying there? So then I ended up staying there. And one of the things I did find, Jessica, compared to normal criminal work or whatever, you need good cooperation And there was a great cooperation between myself, the Gardaí, the support services, the Child and Family Agency, or whatever. So I'm proud that we did a few things that were good.
I think it's really important to stress that while there are concerns about young people from care coming in contact with the criminal justice system, that what we also know is that the vast majority of young people in care don't have any contact with the criminal justice system. And I think that's a really important point to highlight also for young people and for the broader public.
Can I thank those very tough and soul-searching questions that have been asked by Jessica? Can I wish you all the very best for today? And can I thank again Jessica for highlighting these really, really important issues, and I hope that you take forward this discussion within EPIC.
I was just going to ask Judge O'Connor if he has anything else he'd like to add to the topic.
No, I'd like to thank you. I found it very interesting. You're very, very good to ask me to be interviewed, and I wish you every success with your studies. I think you're a very dedicated girl. You have a very bright future ahead of you. So congratulations in that regard.
Thank you.